In this video, I'm going to give you my top 5 use cases for the code node in n8n. And after watching this video, you will be able to apply all of these use cases to your own automations, even if you don't know how to code. The first use case is you can use the code node to create lists of multiple items. A lot of you already know that you can use the edit fields node to create a single item. So for example, here I have such a node. And if I execute this step with all of these different fields, then it creates a single item, and the data of this item is whatever I put into these fields. However, the problem here is I cannot create multiple items, but I can use the code node for that. So right here, I have a code node called websites list. Let's drag this over here. And this code node, all it does, it returns an array. So you can see the square brackets means it's an array or a list of items. And then multiple different objects. So with the name of the website and a link. Name of the website link, name of the website link. And if I execute this, you can see it now outputs me a list of multiple items. So with this pattern, I can do everything that I can do in the set fields node, except I can now even generate multiple items with it in a single node. And the best part is this is not really hard to understand what's going on here, even if you don't know how to code. And actually, I use this exact list in one of my production automations. So for example, here I have an uptime monitoring automation, which basically checks all of my websites if they are still live. And here I also have such a website list. It returns a list of multiple websites to check. And then an error message that I want the automation to send to Telegram in case the website is no longer online so that I get notified. Use case number 2 of the code node is some type of custom split out or chunking operation. So you take a single item and turn it into multiple smaller items. So for example, n8n has this node called split out node. And here I can take a list that is nested inside of a single item. For example, here this website item has this administrators list. And I can drag that here. And if I execute this, this list inside of this single item gets split out into 3 different items. However, this split out operation is not really viable for more complex operations. So for example, what you can see here is I have a very long text inside of this field, like a small blog post. And usually this long text is something that you would receive from an AI automation or an AI node. And then I want to send this text to Telegram. The problem is Telegram has a character limit for each message of 4096 characters, which means if it's longer than that, the message will fail. And for that custom split or chunking operation, I'm also using a code node here. Now this code already looks a little more complicated, but all I did here was I described the task to ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT generated all of this for me. So actually, none of this is written by myself. And in a few moments, I'm actually going to show you how to generate such a code in n8n with ChatGPT. I'm going to walk you through a live example and write a prompt together with you. And all this code does is it takes the message, and if it's longer than 4096 characters, it will split it up into multiple messages. And here it makes sure to only split it between words and not within a word. And if I execute this, you can see it turns this one item with a very long text into 2 items with 2 smaller pieces of that text. And then I can send both of these messages to Telegram and everything works as expected. Now, one thing that you should be aware of, this code node and what we are looking at today is a more technical aspect of n8n. So n8n has a couple of these technical features like the code node and also expressions and other things like that. And basically this is what gives n8n all of its power and potential. And if you are interested in learning all of these technical aspects of n8n completely from the ground up, then feel free to check out my course called Technical n8n Simplified, where I teach you all of these technical fundamentals of n8n completely from the ground up. So if that's interesting to you, I will put a link in the video description. Okay, let's get to use case number 3. I called this advanced score and value calculation. So a lot of times in n8n we have a list of items and we have to calculate one derived value or score based on that. For a few simpler cases, n8n has a node called summarize, which is actually quite a useful node. And what summarize does is it takes a list of input items and then you can run an aggregation function. For example, you can count the list of items and it will give you the number of items as a final score. Or you can count how many unique items you have, the sum of some values, the maximum, minimum, average, and so on and so forth. And this works really well for a lot of simpler use cases. However, in a lot of cases, you have some more complex use cases. For example, here I have a list of students that I pull from an Airtable database. And this list of students includes the student name and then all of the individual subject and the grade which they scored in the subjects. And my task is now to take these student grades and calculate a final grade for the end of the year. The problem is that I cannot just take the average of all of the grades that they scored in each individual subject. Because obviously I have to factor in the importance of each subject. Math, for example, or Spanish is usually more important than philosophy or history. And that's why I have a second table called grade importance, where I get a list of all of the different subjects with their importance as a factor. So basically how strongly this subject will influence the final grade. And you can see this task is already much more complicated. This is not something I could perform with the simple summarize node. But instead, I used the code node. And the code inside of this code node performs this task. And again, I did not write any of this, as you can see from these lots of comments here. This was also written by ChatGPT. And if I execute this step, you can see we get a list of students with their grades and a final grade that is based on the weighted average with the importance of each subject factored in. And all you have to do to generate this code is you just have to describe to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever AI you use, you just have to describe really detailed what is going on, what is your input, and what is the output that you would like to generate. Okay, use case number 4 of the code node is to combine related data, and I really like this one a lot. So what we do here is we get a list of Reddit posts, and then for each individual post, we also pull all of the comments of the post. The problem here is that right now, the comments and the posts are two separate lists of items, so they are not connected directly. The only way they are connected here is if we look at the comments, each comment has this parent ID. And this parent ID basically references the post that the comment belongs to. But otherwise they don't have a connection. They are separate lists of items. What I would like to do now is I would combine them so that I have a list of posts, and for each post I want a list of the associated comments nested inside of it. And here again, this is not something you can easily do with some default n8n operations, but instead I use this code node. This code I actually wrote myself, but you could also generate this with ChatGPT if you just describe really well what type of code you would like to have. And obviously you could also use this Ask AI feature that the cloud version of n8n offers. Let's execute this. And you can see, if I pull this over here, we get a list of posts. And here we have for each post the comments nested as an array inside of it, which is exactly what I wanted. Okay. And that leads me to use case number 5, which is probably my favorite one, and that I called simplify workflows. So right here I have an example where in the beginning I generate a list of animals, then with the amount of legs they have and the speed at which they run, so their maximum speed. And this, by the way, uses the same pattern that we looked at in step number 1. We use the code node to create item lists. But this is not what workflow number 5 is about. I just used this to generate the list of animals. The actual task is to then create a list of the 4 fastest animals, one from each leg category. Because if I were just to take the 4 fastest animals, then it would always be the one with 4 legs, because usually they are the fastest. So that's why the task is to generate the 4 fastest, but 1 from each category. So here I sort all of them by speed. Then I split them out depending on how many legs they have. So the 2-legged animals go on this branch, 4-legged this, 6-legged this, and 8-legged animals go on this branch. And then for each branch I have this limit node set here that only lets one item through, so basically takes the fastest animal from each leg category. And then here in this merge node we just append all of them together so we get our final result. And this is fully functional, it works as expected. So if I execute this and take a look at the output, we can see the fastest 2-legged animal is the ostrich, which makes total sense. The fastest 4-legged animal is the cheetah. The fastest 6-legged animal is the dragonfly. I did not know that. And the fastest 8-legged animal seems to be the octopus. So you can see everything works as expected. However, the problem is you can see we're using 7 nodes to perform this operation. And this example might be a little ridiculous, but in a moment I'm going to show you how I actually use this in a production automation. But you can see here we are using 7 nodes to achieve this relatively simple operation. And if you have a bigger automation or a bigger workflow, this can really clutter your automation quite quickly. So sometimes in these cases it can be useful, even though it is possible to perform this with the native n8n nodes, to encapsulate this in a single code node. So let's put this into ChatGPT and I'm going to show you my process, how you can generate code for n8n. So inside of here I'm going to paste a prompt and I'm going to put that exact prompt in the video description so you can use that. The prompt is, I need to write some code for my n8n automation to be run inside an n8n code node. So this you always put. And then you write the code node should, and then the task that must be performed. In my case, take a list of animal input items and return the top 4 fastest animals, 1 from each leg category, 2-legged, 4-legged, 6-legged, and 8-legged. Below is the list of input items received from the previous node. And this sentence, this here, is extremely important that you use it exactly like this. In n8n you can't access an item's value directly. Instead, you must access the item via the .json key. For example, to get the value of a field called name, you must use item.json.name rather than item.name. This is just how n8n's data structure works behind the scenes. And then also an important sentence, you can access the full list of input items with $input.all. And then we write, here is the list of input items. Or rather, here is an example list of input items, because obviously they could be different every single time. Then we go to n8n, open the animal node. Then we go to JSON, and whenever you display an input or output as JSON, you can copy it. So right now I'm just going to copy all of the animal items and then bring it to ChatGPT and paste it here. Now it pastes all of these items here. And now we can generate the code. And let's see what it does. Okay, this is what it generated. Let's copy this and bring it to n8n and try it out. Code, paste this here. And obviously, by the way, you could also, if you're using the n8n cloud version, you can also do this with this Ask AI option. But I have personally found that if I use my own custom prompts for my own use cases, I can tweak it more. And this way it works a little better for me. But this feature here is actually not that bad as well. Let's execute this and see what it does. Execute step. And you can see it generates us the same table that we had previously, the list of the top 4 fastest animals from each leg category. So ostrich, cheetah, dragonfly, and octopus. So that still worked as expected. And we have now taken 7 different nodes and encapsulated the functionality within one single code node. And there's one important thing. Whenever you do that, what you immediately have to do after is you have to give your code node a proper name. Otherwise, you come back to this workflow a few weeks later and have no idea what's happening. So I'm going to call this determine fastest animals. because that is what's going on inside of here. And the interesting thing is there are so much more things that you could do with the code node because it has so much potential. And if you are interested in more use cases of the code node, then subscribe to this YouTube channel because that's going to be one of my next videos. Okay, thank you for tuning in. My name is Mike. Have a great day. Bye.